Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Homeschooling and Inclusive Education, a webinar that is going to be conducted tonight by Dr. Patti Stout. But before we get to the webinar this evening, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Cathy Miller. I'm the Director of Community Services here at Temple University's Institute on Disabilities. The Institute on Disabilities is Pennsylvania's University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, Education, Research, and Service. We are one of 67 centers across the nation and in the territories of the United States, and we are bringing this session to you. I would like to tell you our vision, which is a society where all people are valued and respected, and where all people have the knowledge, opportunity, and power to improve their lives and the lives of others. We conduct our mission by learning from and working with people with disabilities and their families in diverse communities across Pennsylvania to create and share knowledge, change systems, and promote self-determined lives so that disability is recognized as a natural part of the human experience. The webinar series is brought to you by Competence and Confidence, Partners in Policymaking, Family Leadership, which we like to refer to as C2P2 Family Leadership. And as you know, it's brought to you by the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University, and funding for our project comes from the Pennsylvania Developmental Disabilities Council. C2P2 Family Leadership in Inclusive Education for Non-Traditional Schools is designed for families of students with disabilities who are educated in homeschools, cyber charter schools, private schools, and parochial schools. We also gear our sessions to administrators and staff within these settings. The goal is to create a network of family leaders who will work together with educators and administrators to champion inclusive practices for children with disabilities in the non-traditional school community. The project's activities include online leadership development training, such as our webinar this evening, free one-on-one parent consultation, supports from trained parent consultants with our collaborators, Pennsylvania's Education for All Coalition, the acronym known as PEAK, that many of you know of. We also have online resources for you. You can go to our webpage and see those. And I just wanted to briefly tell you about our available archived webinars. Our project is coming to a close in June, and this is our 12th and final webinar this evening. However, we have 11 other webinars that are archived on our website. And you can see on the slide right in front of you that we've listed a number of those webinars. And on the bottom of the slide is the reference to the our website, our webpage. So you can just click right on that once we send you the PowerPoint. Actually, you'll have to copy and paste it because it won't be live, but that is the actual address page to go and directly to our web page on our website. You can also just go to the Institute on Disabilities website, which is www.disabilities.temple.edu. Look under programs and you'll find us there as well. So we've had a wide array of webinars, building social capital, igniting inclusion, talking about positive behavioral interventions and supports. On the next page, you'll see one of our most popular ones, cyber safety, keeping kids safe in the digital world, talking about evaluations, how to make those community connections for your child, especially for those people I know who are very interested in tonight's subject on homeschooling and inclusive education. How does one then, connect their kids to community resources? Creating a vision for your child's future, how to work together as a team, learning the laws and rules to support your child's education, as well as a basic understanding of what is inclusion. What are we talking about when we talk about inclusion? So again, I encourage everyone who, if you have not had the opportunity to see these wonderful webinars, all done by different experts in the field, families of children with disabilities, I encourage you to go if you're interested in a topic and listen to those webinars. So the other thing that we did, as I mentioned, Pennsylvania's Education for All Coalition, PEAK, collaborates with us and is a partner with us in this project. And it is free one-on-one parent consultation that's available through the project. And all you need to do is make a request, and we will match you with one of PEAK's trained parent consultants. And what those parent consultants can help you with is, for example, locating resources and supports, helping you understand what your child's rights are. You may need or require or would like some assistance in reviewing your child's individual education plan or their evaluation report. They can also help you to develop strategies to support your child's inclusive education, giving you some suggestions and ideas for accommodations and supports, again, tailored to your child's specific needs, and if need be, and this has been in the case, if you would like someone to attend an IEP meeting with you during a transition time, either from early intervention to preschool or to secondary transition, they would be more than happy to go with you as a parent consultant. So the way that you can request a parent consultant is a PEAK parent consultant is to go to our website, and you'll see that a form is right there on that website as well. And again, support can be offered to you over the phone or by email or in person, really depending on what your needs are and locations of where the consultant would be and where you would be as well. So another thing that I've mentioned is that we do have online resources. One of those online resources is a closed family leadership Facebook group, and all you need to do is go on to Facebook and click the join group under that Facebook address that's given on the slide. And again, that will be available for you after this webinar this evening. You'll be able to access this PowerPoint with all of these references. So you just go on there, go to that Facebook group and click Join Group, and your request will be accepted within a few days. We do like to have a closed group because we want to make sure that it's a safe space where confidentiality is guaranteed among the participants and to allow people to have a robust conversation without any, feeling confident and safe. So another exciting project that we have in this 5th and final year of this project is that we have some short video vignettes that we have taped, one of them with Patrick Schwarz from National Louis University. Dr. Schwarz spoke with us on inclusive education, and the idea and the intent here is we videotaped him and really want to make his take on inclusive education available to administrators who may need to have some prompting and some good information, evidence-based information on why inclusive education is important. This little video vignette is going to be about 10 minutes long. So again, it's something that people will be able to use and refer to their administrators, the people that they're working with, who are may need some more information about inclusive education. The same will be true. We're about to do a podcast with Al Condalusi, who's with CLASS, Community Living and Support Services out in the western portion of the state, and he'll be talking about community supports and engagement. So when these vignettes are available, we will certainly let you know, and be posting those on our website. In fact, we'll probably do an email announcement to everyone who's ever been on one of our webinars so that you'll be advised that these are available for your use. So certainly if you need more information about C2P2FL, you can contact Kathy Raccia-Meyer, who is our Family Education Coordinator here at the Institute on Disabilities, and has a wealth of information that she can share with you about this project, as well as about many other things concerning education throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So just some housekeeping items for tonight. If you have questions about tonight's topic, you can see on your far right, well, at the top right of the screen, you can open and close the chat panel. See that little conversation icon? You can just hit on there and you can type in your questions and then click send, which is to the right. On my screen, it's actually on the bottom right. There's a box that's open, and you can simply, as I said, type your question in, hit send, and our presenter will be able to answer your questions. We'll be directing your questions to her during the presentation. And then we will also have a time after Dr. Stout is done presenting to give you some time to ask questions. So the other really important thing is to, if you would be so kind, is to take a moment right after tonight's webinar to complete a brief evaluation. It will pop up on your screen after we close the webinar. If you joined by phone, watch your email for a link to the survey. I'll be reminding you again at the end of the webinar that we would certainly appreciate the evaluation so that for future projects such as this, we really do pay attention to what your comments are, and we'll, offer you trainings and webinars to meet those needs. So thank you for that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Patty Stout. Dr. Stout is from HIS Homeschool Center. She is one of Pennsylvania's own, and we're very pleased that she is going to be speaking with us tonight on homeschooling and inclusive education. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Stout, who now has the privilege of speaking to you all. Thank you. Patty?
Hi, everybody. It's great to have you here. Thank you for joining in with us. And I'm trying to imagine who you are. And I imagine that some of you are already homeschooling children with special education needs. Some of you are interested in homeschooling and investigating. And some of you are like me, alumni and former, I don't want to say former because my heart is still with homeschooling, but shall I say retired? Because all of my children have graduated through homeschooling. And so I share a little bit about myself. I have 3 children, my husband and I have, and we embarked on our homeschooling adventure as an experiment, thinking we'll try it for 1 year, and 20 years later we hung up our hat because we graduated all 3 of our children. And so just one technical question I have is, can I advance the slides myself? Or is somebody going to advance the slides for me? Okay.
Hi, it's Kathy. Yes, you can. So if you go up top, you'll see there's a rectangular box on top of your slide.
There we got it.
Thank you.
Nope. Okay. Sorry about this. Thought we had practiced it. I don't have a next. Okay. Sorry, everybody. If somebody
I apologize. Amy's working on this. This is Kathy. Hold on just a moment.
Well, I can entertain people with homeschooling stories. Let me tell you. So if you'll just chime in and let me know when that's working. So let me tell you a little bit more. How did we come to homeschool? My children came to us through adoption, and our oldest one was a preemie, and by the time he hit school age, he still needed to nap. And I looked around, and every kindergarten program around here was full day. And so we decided, well, we found one that was 3-day full day. We figured he could sleep the last 2 days of the week to catch up. But then the week before school started, after we had him signed up for kindergarten and everything, the school district contacted us and said, oh, by the way, because you're sending him to that school and the timing's different, we'll bus him on the public school high school bus. And I said, I don't think that that's going to work for my kindergartner. So we decided spur of the moment, the week before school started, to homeschool. That is not the way to do it. There we go. Sorry about the technical issues here. We can practice and practice and practice. So that's how we started to homeschool, and we decided we would do for 1 year. And as I said before, 20 years later, we graduated our third. Now, we're talking specifically tonight about homeschooling children with special education needs. So in a way, that first one was a special need. And then our middle child probably could have been diagnosed either as pretty ADHD or even high on the spectrum. But we never had him formally diagnosed. And then our youngest was profoundly deaf, and so she was obviously special needs. And so we'll weave her story in as we go, and part of our personal story as we go. Okay, I'm going to pause.
Hi, Patty. This is Cathy. If you could pass us back the presenter toggle, we'll take care of the slides for you.
To Amy?
There you go.
Okay. I can
Sorry
switch
about
them
that.
now. I have the ability. So we're good to go?
We are.
Alrighty.
Just let us know when you'd like us to move to the next slide. Thank you.
I can actually do it now. Okay, here we go. Now let's get down to business. There we go. That's my first slide there. I wanted you to let you know that my website is there on that slide. So if you want to go and explore any of the resources that I have on my website, you can come back to the first slide. There we go. So I went as a mom homeschooling children with special needs. I did some looking around, and I saw, you know what, I'm not the only one in this boat, but there was no central repository to get information, and I started hearing of other moms in the same situation, and dads. I don't ever say it to the exclusion of dads. And then because I'm a certified teacher, eventually I started to do homeschool evaluations. And I just wanted to clarify right up front of this presentation that when we say the word evaluation, we're not talking special ed diagnostic evaluations. We're talking homeschool evaluations that all homeschoolers have to go through for a portfolio at the end of the year. So I notice in my correspondence that many times the word evaluation gets confused when we're having one foot in the special education world and one foot in the homeschooling world. When I'm talking tonight about evaluations, it'll be purely the homeschool evaluation with a certified teacher at the end of the school year. And so I bumped into other moms, especially as I began doing evaluations. And one particular mom said to me that she had been looking and looking and looking for some resources. And that's what this slide is about. People who knew about special ed didn't know about homeschooling. And people who knew about homeschooling didn't know about special ed. And that last line there on that slide, I feel as though I have been winging it and walking in the dark, so to speak. That pretty much puts into context most parents that are homeschooling, but also most parents who are homeschooling children with special education needs. It's important to know, just a little background and context, that homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. However, each state has individual laws, and they're all extremely different. If I hear somebody moving to a different state, I say, you better research that law. People who are coming into Pennsylvania, we have one of the more stringent laws in the nation, come in with shaking and trembling and fear and find out that really our law isn't all that bad once you get down to the nitty-gritty. And so for this webinar, we're focusing particularly on the Pennsylvania law because there are tiny little nuances that are important to know if you have a child with special needs. All homeschooling families in Pennsylvania are required to submit a notarized affidavit with educational objectives, one affidavit per family, educational objectives per child, to their school district of residence before they begin homeschooling. That is all homeschooling families in Pennsylvania. We have to do that at the beginning of each year. And the first year when you're homeschooling, it doesn't matter when you put it in, but every subsequent year, that has to be filed with the district before August 1st. Most of us who have evaluations done at the end of the school year, which we'll get around to talking about, usually take our affidavit and objectives for next year into the school when we take our things from our evaluation in at the end of the previous year. So we only end up making one trip or sending in one packet of registered mail receipt requested. And so the difference then, when you have a child who has been formally diagnosed, especially in paperwork to the school district, now that would be perhaps they attended classes before these children, and he or she was pulled out to begin homeschooling, then that child is identified already. The school district is aware that that child has a diagnosis with a special need according to the law. And then the extra step that is required for homeschooling children with identified special needs, identified in their documentation to the school district, is that along with the affidavit and the objectives for that child, you need to have a letter of approval from either a certified special ed teacher or a school psychologist. That's one extra step. For some, it's a little step, not a big problem, and for others, it's a huge step because who am I going to get to write that letter? That's one service that I offer, and I also can connect you with other people around the state or try to help you network within your circle of influence, your sphere of influence. Who do you know to be able to find that resource? I'm also willing to mentor and tutor other people who are interested but just don't know our law but are very supportive of the homeschooling idea. So that's the big technical difference between homeschooling typical learners and homeschooling children who have been identified with special needs. And that, let's go on to the next slide. So there's legal considerations, and this goes point by point what I was just saying before. The child has been formally diagnosed and is labeled in documentation to the district. That is most poignantly visible when the child was enrolled in the special ed programs in the district and the child is being pulled out to begin homeschooling. That's when you notice that's where the rubber meets the road and you need to take this extra step. And that is there, it says, to provide a letter from a certified special ed teacher or psychologist approving the program as addressing the child's special education needs. Throughout this slide, you'll see the SEN. There are many different labels that we use for special ed, and some of them can come across offensive. And in my research for my dissertation, I came across this term, and I thought, that is nice and gentle, special education needs. So that's what you'll see throughout my slides. Parents may request special ed services from the school district, especially if the school district is very homeschool friendly. The school district cannot force the parents to take special ed services. Neither can the parents force the district to give special ed services. Both the district and the parents must be in agreement for the family to be able to access services. In 2001, when No Child Left Behind was great big, there was a provision that was made that said that homeschoolers were exempted from a lot of that part of the law, so it took pressure off us, and we have the option to get services from the schools, or we can go find private resources. But just because we're not getting them from the schools doesn't mean that we're neglecting our children, not at all. Excuse me. So at the end of the school year, we've started the beginning of the school year. Now we skip over, all that work, all that wondering if we're doing okay, and go to the end of the school year. And every homeschooling family, for children that fall under compulsory attendance laws, and I can expound on that later, need to have an end of the year evaluation by a certified teacher. One of the points of confusion is that that teacher does not, NOT, need to be a special ed certified teacher. The only time the law specifies that you need the services of a special ed teacher, certified teacher, is for that letter of approval for your affidavit at the beginning of the year. So any certified teacher could do your end of the year evaluation. And when you get ready to do that, what do you need to do? What is an evaluation? Now remember, these are not diagnostic evaluations that you would go to a clinic or a psychologist to have your child diagnosed with learning disabilities or autism or anything like that. This is purely a homeschool evaluation at the end of the school year. And to prepare for that, hopefully all year long you've been keeping some kind of log, and I see many different styles of logs. I have sample logs on my website. You're keeping some kind of log that's showing at least your days of attendance. The state's intent behind the thought of log is that there's some annotation on there as to what you've done, but it's not clearly stated in the law, so we have many, many different family individual interpretations to what that means, from circles on a calendar saying, hey, I have 180 circles here, I've satisfied the attendance requirement, to families who sit down and write out full-page journals. So there's no right or wrong, as long as the law says that the evaluator must be able to see, did you do the time required? Did you school for either 180 days, or for elementary children, that's 6th grade and down, did you school for 900 hours? You can log either by days or by hours. You don't have to do both. Or for children 7th grade and above, that's called secondary, 990 hours. Both levels of homeschooling are 180 days. The only time there's a difference is if you choose to log by hours. And so I need to see a log. Did you complete the time required? And then bring a portfolio. In your portfolio, you need to show evidence of progress. And so I suggest, I can't mandate 3 samples. Some families would say I'm going to go bare minimum and give you 2 samples, something from the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. So I can say, wow, you've made progress. Even if the child has severe disabilities and is making tiny little progress, I'll still see that you made it from lesson 1 to lesson 5. Is that a year's worth of progress? If that's what that child needed, that's fine. And so we need to see evidence of time required, and we need to see somewhere that you've touched on the subjects required. The law never specifies how much of any particular subject you have to have, but is history in there somewhere? Well, gosh, if I go to Gettysburg and have a field trip, I've got history. And guess what? That's Pennsylvania history and U.S. history. That's pretty wonderful. And if I go out back and catch bugs, well, that can be science. I'm not saying that should be your only thing, but especially when the children are lower functioning, some of those are amazing experiences, touching in all the subjects. And then another thing you need to bring to the evaluation besides your log and your portfolio is your child. So the law says that as an evaluator, I need to interview your child and review your portfolio. Those are my 2 verbs, interview and review. And then I need to certify that there's an appropriate education taking place. And appropriate means time required, subjects required, and evidence of sustained progress in the overall program. And I made up a little checklist that I pulled all of those words from the law, and I go check, 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 and I see that either with the samples of work you've given me, or in the log, or in our interview. And I include the parents in that because I don't make it a terrible, awful thing at the end of the year. I make it, let's celebrate the end of the year. And so that's why I have at the bottom of that slide. Hopefully you'll find an evaluator who approaches it in a similar way that I do, but I don't expect all evaluators to be Patty, and that would be a celebration of your school year. How are we doing? Do we have any questions so far? I'll keep going. We have a question. What if the child is behind in skills for his or her grade level and is not doing specific subject work for that grade? It's interesting because if you go through the law, the entire law, which is Act 196 of 2014, there's a few places you'll find the word grade. One, and the most notable, is for standardized testing in grades 3, 5, and 8. The other place that grade is found is the division between elementary, grade 6, and secondary, grade 7. Nowhere else in the law is the word grade mentioned importantly. And so we have to remember that grades are a point of reference for issuing a child through the public school system or the private school. I'm going to say the mass education system. And it's a point of reference. And so there really is no grade level other than when am I going to give this standardized test? I say it's important to teach to the child's mastery level. I go by a theorist called Vygotsky, and he talks about a ZPD, a zone of proximal development. And that means what has the child already learned and what is the child ripe and ready to go ahead and learn? And so in the portfolio, I'm not looking for grade-specific work. I'm looking for where did the child start at the beginning of the year, and has the child shown sustained progress in the overall program in relation to his or her own skill level and mastery level. The only time we need to be compared with grade levels is the 3 years, grades 3, 5, and 8, when they're standardized tested. And even so, it doesn't matter to me if the scores reflect what mom is observing at home. That, to me, is a successful test. All right, I have another question here. What if my child was not identified as special education needs in public school, but clearly is? Do I still need to submit the letter of approval from a special ed teacher? That's up to a matter of conscience. And we're going to get on with that. So if you don't mind me holding that question, we'll come back to that in one of our upcoming slides, because that is what I have labeled as the dilemma. So let's go to our next slide. We lightly brushed on standardized testing, and it's required for grades 3, 5, and 8. However, in special ed, what does that really mean? I've had lots of different interpretations of that. One of my families was unschooling, and that means that they were schooling like free spirits and not using specific formal curriculum, but trying to make the most of every educational opportunity that came up during their day. It's an approach to homeschooling. There's no right or wrong. And they said, well, then I guess third grade would be the third year that we're formally submitting paperwork. And so they decided to have standardized testing then. But they asked me then to norm the test on age level rather than grade level, because they, in their schooling, didn't use a grade placement level for reference for anything. And so there's a lot of flexibility. Now, with the test that I give down at the bottom of the slide, it's called the Woodcock-Johnson, and that's also the picture that's there. It's an individualized test, and it's not a specific test. This is what I give for third graders, and I give a different test for fifth graders and a different test for eighth graders. Today, I tested fifth and eighth graders, and I gave them the same test, but as a trained examiner, I know that I use a different starting point and stopping point. But other ones, like if you order the CAT, the California Achievement Test online, that one you have to be specific to grade level. So you have to find out what best fits your needs. There's a question, is there a certain age or grade you must begin the formal process of getting an affidavit? Excuse me. In Pennsylvania, we have what's called compulsory attendance age. If a child has never been enrolled in formal school, then compulsory attendance age is age 8. And so on the 8th birthday or the year the child's going to turn 8, you can submit an affidavit either at the beginning of that year or in the middle when they turn 8. And then that's when you begin having your evaluations at the end of the school year. If your child has been enrolled in first grade and now there's been some change in the perspective on the law, even kindergarten, for one day, then to pull that child out and begin to homeschooling, you would be legally required to have that affidavit in. So I hope that answers that question. Okay. Another change that has taken place recently in 2014 is that the standardized testing scores are not required. We are not required to turn them into the school district. And so that's really between you and your evaluator. And to me, the scores are just another way to show that the child is making progress. So testing should not generate fear. I see so many children that come in for testing that are scared. You know why? Because moms are scared. And moms are communicating test anxiety to the children when all we do is have fun together. So it's quite interesting. And so there are many, many options available for the testing. For children with special needs, I highly recommend doing the one-on-one testing. There is a fee. You can get free testing in school if you want to blend your children in with the PSSAs if they're used to that. Great. There are many options. If you have more questions about them, bring them up. Let's go on to the next slide. So what are our options? Some families prefer to have their struggling learners. That's a nice non-label label to be able to say my child's really struggling, but he's not been formally diagnosed with a disability. Some families choose to have their struggling learners remain unidentified in their documentation to the district. So this goes back to that question. Others may choose to seek support services for their children through private resources rather than requesting help from the school district. But that then presents that question of funding for those services, and that's what we'll talk about next. Let's go to the next slide. So the big dilemma then is, do I engage with my school district and ask them for support services? Some school districts are very homeschool friendly and some are very adversarial. And I can't answer that for each one of you because each one of you is from a different school district. The majority of the school districts with whom I interact as a representative of the families I evaluate, which does not require me to interact with the district, but sometimes the families want me to, are very homeschool friendly or homeschool neutral. But I've only had one or two adversarial interactions, and usually once we get the feathers unruffled, all of a sudden they're more amicable. And so families also say, should I utilize my district services? Should I utilize private services? Should I try to go things on my own? What are the advantages and disadvantages of each of those? And that touches on that question that we had. So in one particular family, they do live in an adversarial district. Matter of fact, this family found me through networking and actually traveled 3 to 4 hours to come see me as their evaluator, which is not necessary, but it's their choice. And they said that they were speaking with a representative from an organization called the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And those of us in the homeschooling world just slip it out and say HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And if you join and pay their membership fee, they will provide you legal representation in any conflicts that you have or interactions with your school district, especially if the district is adversarial. And they will also provide then free representation all the way up to the Supreme Court if it would end up as a really, really serious legal issue. And that's for your membership of a little bit over $100 a year, which sounds like a lot of money for some families, and others it's like, anything's worth the peace of mind to have backup. I had help from HSLDA in one scenario with our district. But this family that I spoke with, represented on this slide, said that they talked with somebody from HSLDA, and HSLDA actually has special needs coordinators, so they're another resource for you families out there. But that one coordinator said, oh, go talk to the public school and let them know you have struggling learners. However, their organization was in a different state and didn't understand Pennsylvania law, just the special ed coordinator. The lawyers certainly understood. And this mom said, thank you for your advice, but that's about the worst thing that I could do in our given situation. And so she then went on to speak with one of the attorneys from HSLDA, and they supported her in her decision to try to fly under the radar and be as nondescript as she could. So she's never identified her children in the paperwork as having special needs, and yet she's privately addressing those special needs with resources apart from the school district. So that leads us to another question. One of the questions is, what about the naysayers? I thought about putting up another slide, another title on this slide. What about the naysayers? Oh, you shouldn't homeschool your child with special needs. Your child needs a special ed teacher. Oh, you can't give your child what he or she's going to need. Oh, what about all those naysayers? Has anybody out there had any naysayers? Do one of those hand pop-up things there on the technology of this webinar. I did. Is this the best thing for the child with special needs? Well, I look back through the literature and I see that in public schools, when a child has special needs, they're given an IEP. That's an individualized education plan. Well, what's homeschooling? How much more individualized could you get? Unless you have 95 kids, but even so, it's still a small group because many times classrooms are 25 children in the public schools. And I'm not anti-public school. I think that I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly public school. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly private school. I've now seen the good, the bad, and the ugly cyber school. And guess what? I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly homeschool as well. So I'm not pro one or the other. I just know we had a fantastic experience with homeschooling. So anyway, individualized. Homeschooling is like the tutorial approach. Guess what? Many of the presidents from the United States were brought up with the tutorial approach before public schools became the rage. Homeschooling can individualize the education in both their curriculum, what is being taught, and in instruction, how it's being taught. We can all back up and backpedal and stop and think, oh yeah, we can individualize. We can actually make adjustments constantly as we're going because we can see if the child gets it or not. That's called sustained personal alteration. You're getting all these fancy terms. Another thing is we can teach to mastery learning. It doesn't matter if they're on, quote, their grade level. What do they get? What do they know? And what do they need to know next? Let's wait to move on until they actually get it. There's one famous theory out there called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And down, it starts at the bottom. And it says the child needs to feel safe, working its way up. And the child needs to feel like he belongs. And look at the green one on that slide. It says the child has self-esteem. Really, level 4 is where first children can actually begin to learn. Before that, they're so busy trying to survive and be safe, they can't really learn to learn. Let me just interject a little story here. I had one homeschooling family. The boy had really intense ADD. And so he went to first grade, and his mom said, stay on your seat. So all day long, he held onto the chair at his desk and held on and was silently talking to his tush and saying, stay on my seat, stay on my seat, stay on my seat. Well, he came home that first day after first grade, and Mommy says, what did you learn? He said, I don't remember. I was too busy staying on my seat. And so that's an example of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He was so focused, all his energies on staying safe, not falling off the chair, not being a bad boy, trying to fit in, trying to belong. He didn't have any energy left to try to learn. And so some of the environment that we can create at home, if we have the right kind of home environment, is support and being able to free that child up to actually begin learning. Someone says it's too overwhelming. I wonder what is overwhelming, the whole thought of having the child at home or all the stuff I'm throwing at them. Let's get away from some of the stuff and go to the next slide. So that brings us back to that dilemma, to label or not to label. There's a labeling conflict. Should I have my child labeled? Many parents said, no, No, oh yeah, I see there was a comment from one of our participants having the child stress at school and worrying too much. That is overwhelming. And a child is so stressed out that he really can't begin that learning process. But what's education? We want him to learn. So that's just another point. Thank you for sharing that. So the labeling conflict. Some people say, I don't want my child to walk through life with a label, and I don't want my child to be embarrassed. He doesn't need to have that label on him, and everybody's going to say, he's special ed, or he's the dummy, or he's, especially in this bullying age. So parents have a valid point there. And yet, there's also valid points to avoid the labels. We don't want to have to avoid the labels. First of all, if parents avoid labels, then they can say, oh, there's nothing wrong with my child. It's easier to get steeped into denial, even though you know you're struggling uphill all the time to get the learning. It helps them in their own grieving process, but it also helps them move ahead in a healthy manner through the grief and identify then what's a better way to approach school. What material should I have? Dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. What materials should I get out there? We'll try handwriting without tears. We'll try all about spelling. We'll try. It's easier if the parents have a label or a handle in their mind of what are the specific issues we're dealing with to be able to address what is it instead of just floundering around and hit and miss and things like that. It puts that handle on the child's struggles and it frees that parent up to get that information. The other thing we can do then, once we've identified the weak areas, we can turn and focus on the strengths. So often we get so hung up on focusing on the child's weaknesses, we forget that this is a normal child with extra special challenges, and we need to get them back to being a child. Questions on that? So let's look at some sources of support. There are advantages and disadvantages for going with the district. The advantages is it's free services. The disadvantages is then you have the child formally approved and you have to, labeled, and you have to get that pre-approval letter by that special education teacher. The other thing is some people feel that there's a greater risk for being scrutinized, and that is, there's an extra vulnerability. And again, it depends on the atmosphere within your district, if it's a friendly district or an adversarial district. I need to share one story, and that's that my daughter, who's profoundly deaf, we had her identified and got her enrolled in early intervention services when she was 2, and then we transitioned her to preschool services when she was 3 to begin heading up towards school-age services. All along, they knew I was homeschooling the older brothers, but we never confirmed that we were going to homeschool her. And I said I want to keep my options open, which underneath said I really wanted to see if I could keep these amazing services because she had a therapist specially trained in deaf speech. Now, I could sign, and I could teach her, and I could handle all that stuff. It just happens that happens to be my training. But I needed some extra support, and I found a good program, and I wanted to keep it going through the school years. So I got it all set up beforehand and then wanted to keep on going. And our district sat down and thought how much money I was saving them and said, you know what, even though this therapist is not an employee of our district, we will privately hire her to continue on with Heidi, with my daughter. And she did until graduation. And it's amazing how that program was so supportive. I was doing the academics and I had some outside support from our school district, and they were thankful with how much money I was saving them. In that case, it worked beautifully. It does not happen in all cases. One comment came in, you cannot bury your head in the sand when children have special needs. Yeah, that's related to that label or not to label. It's better to identify them and work on it. And creative thinking outside the box. Thank you very, very much. I just knew I needed to get my kids to be all we can be, but now I'm jumping ahead to our last slide, so I don't want to do that. Let's look at other sources of support. There are private sources, clinics, practitioners, even colleges have some clinics available, maybe for a little bit of a reduced fee, sometimes for free. And the advantages with that is you have a choice of your provider, and you can control then how much information flows to the district. I told every resource I was the case manager, send things to me. I would decide who I would send the information to. The disadvantages is instead of homeschooling, we might be van schooling. We might be hopping in the van to go to this appointment and that appointment and that appointment. And then am I really homeschooling or am I van schooling? And the other thing is sometimes those services are not covered by insurance. So I say work closely with your primary care provider or the psychologist who diagnosed your child and see if they can write out a prescription for these therapy services, and if there's any way to work on it that the insurance can help cover some of these resources. I can't promise the moon, but I can say at least you can ask the right questions. Now, another resource that I learned of when I was interviewing the amazing 30 families homeschooling children with special needs while I was writing my dissertation is that each county in Pennsylvania has an office that's somehow labeled as behavioral health, behavioral support, behavioral something. And they are not connected to the school district. They're connected to any child that has a diagnosis that allows that child to be eligible for the public welfare insurance. So back there it was the medical card when my daughter was little. And so those children then are eligible with public funding to have like a personal assistant, a TSS, a therapeutic support staff. And that person can actually come into your home and work with you in your homeschooling program and be like a teacher's aide to keep that child focused while you can work on your other children, work with your other children. It has to be a team. Some of my families that I work with have had phenomenal experiences with the personality matches that have been assigned to their family with TSS workers. Others say there's been personality clashes and it was a negative experience. So, but I just have to at least let you know of resources. Okay, she's mainly helping, hang on, let me go back and see what comment you've got. We have a TSS after going through many hoops. She's mainly helping with our homeschool co-op and upcoming summer day camp. How can parents utilize a TSS in their homeschooling? Not sure what to do with her, feels as if I want her to babysit. Well, supposing, now we're a weird homeschooling family, and we didn't use a lot of textbooks other than for math. We did hands-on unit studies. And I made them up at the beginning, and then when my child was diagnosed with a special need and my energy was out the window, I went over to unit study curriculum. I use Konos. That's one of the ones that's out there. There are many out there, Sunlight and Father's World and lots. So I got one of those curriculums so I could teach all three of my kids at the same time. So as I was teaching the older siblings, my daughter was getting language models from her older brothers. And supposing I was going to do that and we were going to do a special experiment, well, that's when I could use a TSS. I would communicate ahead of time like the classroom teacher and say, this is what we're going to do today. And during this particular activity, it's going to be great, but she's going to need a little bit more guidance and focus. And so if you could sit beside her and help her focus and keep on going so that she can participate with her siblings, that would be fantastic. Meanwhile, the child's not biting or screaming or clawing. It depends on what your child's diagnosis is. So she's there to help with the behavioral things. But one of the benefits then is that if the child's behavior is in control, like on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then we can free that child up to be a good learner. So learning how to work well with the TSS and actually communicate well what you expect with your school day, and then using that person as a team worker and helping your child maximize all the great activities that you can do. So one time we were doing a study across U.S. geography, and we were in New England, and our curriculum said, hey, get a crayfish and dissect it. I said, phooey, the local store has lobster on sale, $5 each or something. So we went down and bought a couple lobster. And you know you have to cook them live, and so we put them in our bathtub. We discovered in science class that lobsters poop orange. And meanwhile, it was time for speech therapy, and the speech therapist showed up at the front door, and all three children, not just the one who was her charge, ran to the front door and said, come to our bathroom. And she said in all her years of therapy, she had never had a personal invitation to a bathroom before, and she got to meet all the lobsters and see that lobsters do indeed poop orange. And we had all this language stuff that was going on that she could pick up and use for her therapy. And it was just exciting. And so that's how we can blend in the extra staff, extra support services, if they're allowed to come into our home. And like I said, I see some comments over here on the side. It depends on the TSS training too. But I'm the kind of mom that, hey, I'm in charge of this program. Let's see how we can work together. This would be a really great way for you to blend in, to free me up to be able to do some other things with my other children. Okay, now I also wanted to talk, let's not forget the other end of the spectrum. Some of these children will actually finish school. Some of these children will graduate. By law, children with special needs are allowed to stay in school until age 21 instead of 18 when we think of graduation, because that's what IEPs cover, is age 3 through 21. Others that actually can function have the hope of getting a job or maybe even going on to college with the proper support system. And so there's things that we need to consider at the other end too. So keep in mind Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, we call that OVR. And there's one for, they're split up geographically around the state. And let me tell you, some of their offices are dynamic and some of them are really undynamic, not effective. So it depends, again, on where you live and how great that office is. I end up doing training no matter where I go. But they can offer job training, job coaching. If your child's able to go out and get a job at Walmart or the grocery store and stock shelves, then the OVR person can have somebody go out with them to get them trained and make sure they stay focused and learn all the ins and outs and the ups and downs and help them have a successful job experience. Others, OVR workers, can help with support getting into college, maybe even opening up some channels of financial aid. They open up a file. You have to have the documentation of your child's disability. So there again, we're back to that question of to label or not to label. Once you choose to label, you open up all kinds of doors in the future. OVR can only work with students who have formal labels. So in our case, our daughter was getting ready to go to college. And we live in a local university town who offers an amazing discount for high school students. And I thought, maybe I'll keep her in high school till she's 21 just to get the discount. Ha ha, sorry about that. And so we contacted OVR and we said, well, how about when she's in high school, we have her start taking one college class so she learns how to go about saying, how do I get an interpreter? How do I get a note taker? What do I need to help me succeed in college? And we did that on a very small scale basis in her later years in high school so that when she became college age, she had learned the system and was highly successful. And I have to say, in 2 or 3 weeks, my daughter is profoundly deaf, is going to graduate with not 1, but 2 bachelor's degrees because she got bored and picked up a second major and has already been accepted into graduate school to teach deaf children. So it seems like the program that we worked out worked for her. I realize each one of us have children in different circumstances, so I'm not using that as a comparison story. I'm using that as an encouragement to say it can be done. The other thing that we have in Pennsylvania is we have the option of homeschool diplomas. It's amazing. And so there are 50 states in this union, and Pennsylvania is one of the few, if not the only, that offers state-recognized diplomas to homeschool programs. I work with 2 in particular, Pennsylvania Homeschoolers, which is like an amazing, almost an honors diploma, and I also work with Susquehanna Valley Homeschool Diploma Program. There's Erie, there's Mason-Dixon, there's several other diploma programs. You can find them on the State Department of Ed's website or even links to some of them on my website. And some of those diploma programs are very flexible and adapting to children with special needs. And I have graduated a number of children with special needs with a homeschool high school diploma. Some of the children were so low functioning that their logs showed that they did the amount of work within the subject area that they could earn a credit, but it was definitely not high school level. So we just said it was an adapted English. It was adapted math. but they got their credits in and they graduated so they could go get a job at Walmart and be greeters or stock shelves or do whatever. It was another step to freeing them up because taking a GED test would be daunting and overwhelming. And then I talked there about college accommodations. Let me tell you, most colleges, especially the good ones, have an office of student accommodations or special needs or whatever it happens to be labeled. And that's when you can get interpreters for deaf students, you can get note takers, you can get tutors. Some are fantastic, some again are weak and ineffective. But it's wonderful to be able to go in. So let me tell you another little story. One of the families that I had, their son was probably one of the more severe cases of dyslexia I had ever seen. He finally started reading a little on his own in 12th grade. That mom was so faithful and kept pushing. And she was just thankful to be able to have him graduate. Those were a lot of adaptive credits. Well, 4 years after graduation, this child comes back after 4 years of lawn mowing business, fantastic worker, hands-on, fantastic skilled worker, and says, I think I want to go to college. Well, after we did CPR on Mom, she's like, what? The problem is she had been a label avoider before, and so had no documentation, had to start from scratch. Where do we go to get the testing? Where do we go to get a label? How can we work with OVR and get all the documentation so that he really can listen to books on tape, have permission to audio tape all of the lectures so he can hear them back again, have somebody else take notes. And that child has graduated, and I'm so proud of that one, now adult. So questions on that? Let me see here. I know departments vary, but our county caseworker from the autism unit has been very supportive of our homeschooling. Even helped find funding for my son to attend an acting class last year. Woo! To help with his social skills. You don't know unless you ask. That's one of the biggest things we should walk away from tonight with that in our brains. You can't be afraid to advocate for your child. And I'll tell you, advocacy is one of our main roles. I signed my daughter up for babysitting classes with the Red Cross because I thought parents are going to be hesitant to have a deaf child babysit. I wanted her to have that certificate. And the Red Cross said, oh, well, you bring your own interpreter. I said, oh, no, you provide it. You get federal funding. And they said, no, you bring. And I said, no, that's not how it works. You have to advocate. And finally, I had this, like, jolt from above of wisdom. And I said, can I just ask you one question? And the Red Cross worker said, what is that? And I said, do you require people in wheelchairs to bring their own ramps? And they shut up and they got her an interpreter. So it's really learning. Okay, we've got a question here. Do you recommend children who have special needs who are homeschooled receive their diploma at 18 or 21? And if 21, do you have what to do from 18 to 21 other than work? You know, that's really hard to answer. It depends on the individual child. And as you are schooling and looking at that child's abilities and strengths, and also, we're going to jump on to our next slide. Let's go there because that's going to help me answer that question. I honestly believe that the significance of our homeschooling is from a bigger perspective. I personally believe that each human is created with a unique plan. And I believe that our job is to equip our children for that plan. So that kind of answers that question. And that means focusing on what they can do and on their abilities. So often we focus on what they can't do. And so you see that picture down at the bottom of that slide is a mom. It looks like she's opening her hands and birds are flying out, and the birds are creating the shape of a heart. And so it's like us being the wind beneath these children's wings. We kind of have to catch a vision earlier, before graduation time, on, I wonder what this child could be doing. I wonder how this child could contribute to life. Is it babysitting? Is it being a companion for an elderly person? Even the child with minimal skills can be an amazing encouragement to others. And so you're shaping and molding a dream for that child as he or she matures. And then when you hit that 18 or 21 question, If the child's not ready to be independent, keep them going until 21. And if the child's ready to move, I don't know, to a group home or something like that. It depends on what your vision is for your child and where that child can fit in and accomplish that plan for his or her life. And that's going to be different for each one, but that's what the whole IEP is about, individualized plan. I know that was a vague answer to a specific question. I'm sorry I can't be more specific. Are there any other questions? That's our last slide. Let me see here. With your homeschooling, have you received behavior analyst support, either through the district or county behavioral services? I haven't, because that wasn't part of my child's spectrum, but I've worked with lots of families who have. My district at present does not have adequate behavioral analyst support or proper training for teachers and paras in ABA to address my son's needs, which has resulted in shortfalls in my son's program. He has autism, and he has regressed in skills while attending the autism support classroom offered by the district. So we're now contemplating private placement with intensive therapy or homeschooling with private therapy for him to catch up, since the district services have been very disappointing. And I'm sure we'd be adversarial in providing a homeschooling program with adequate support. I hear what you're saying, I'm sure, and yet you still might be surprised because they might say, whew, one less burden we have to deal with. And I don't see your child as a burden, but they might. I don't know. So they might be supportive of you. I can't speak for your district. And that's a huge undertaking. Some parents lose income when they choose to homeschool. One thing I found in my research is there's really no way to categorize homeschoolers except we homeschool. Because we all use different curriculum, different approaches, different support services. But there's two categories I found, and one is positive entry, and those are the ones that embrace homeschooling right from the get-go because that's what we want to do. And the others are negative exit because they've had negative experiences like you in a school setting and want to pull the child out to try to work with the child one-on-one and see if you can address the needs more individually. So then you think about socialization. Well, in Pennsylvania, we have so many homeschool co-ops, but children with special needs might have a hard time fitting in no matter what. One of the best things right now I'm finding is Facebook offers great support pages, Homeschooling Children with Special Needs, Homeschooling in Pennsylvania, that help answer a lot of these questions. And then somebody else in your geographic area can put you in contact with other resources in that particular area. Any other questions? Let me see, scroll down. They have been adversarial so far. That's not surprising. Okay, here's a question. I'm an educator with a PA teaching license, so I choose the home tutor option. Yes, I haven't even mentioned that. Are there any downfalls to this as long as I switch to formal homeschool with evaluation in her graduating year? One of the other things that the PA homeschool law allows for is for parents who are certified teachers to register with their district with their child abuse clearances and FBI fingerprints as a private tutor, and somehow or other document that they're getting remuneration for their work. I call it lots of hugs and kisses. And then tutor their kids at home, and that way they don't have to do an evaluation. They don't have to do an affidavit. They don't have to do standardized testing and work that way. As this question points out, the one option it cuts out is you don't have the option of the homeschool diplomas then. And so some of the diploma programs have a policy that you can still get their diploma as long as you jump in for the full senior year. Other than that, I don't see any disadvantages to it, except that it does put some barriers up for some of the diploma programs, and you would have to work that out with each program's policies. But tutoring's great. Any other questions? That's a double-edged sword in socialization. I want them to be around other kids. Oh, that's a big issue, because even, especially with my daughter being deaf, Helen Keller said that blindness separates people from things and deafness separates people from people. So even when she was at co-op, unless I was there to sign for her, she really wasn't socializing. We did have some students volunteer to help with some signing and stuff like that, but boy, that is a double-edged sword. And so for me personally, the way I navigated it was through a lot of prayer. And I can't tell you all to do that, but that's what got my husband and I through. And she eventually got in gymnastics, which was phenomenal, and those gymnastics girls were so supportive of her. When her name was called, they would touch her on the shoulder and point to the guy, and she knew to go up and get her medals. And so just finding that right group who's willing to accept your child. When they went swim parties, she hated swim parties because they're lonely. You can't wear your hearing aids. They did Marco Polo by splashing her, and she would have to turn towards the direction that the splashes came from. So it really depends on what group. So Cathy asking that you read the questions clearly. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Other questions? Let me see that one. What about someone considering transitioning from cyber school to homeschooling? If that means services would not be done in the home anymore, but would necessitate taking the child to the public school for services. So the law says that if your district is amicable and if you agree to have services, the parents are required to take the child to the district property. In our case, I had the situation set up that while she was still preschool and could receive the services at home, and so we carried on that program. And in that case, they said, it's going to cost us more to find a location for her one-on-one therapy because she couldn't participate in group therapy, that they allowed our services to continue in the home. So again, it's a very individualized answer, but it's good to know what your options are and how to approach, and how to approach the district and talk with them, hoping to get support. Our time is winding down. Do we have any final questions? There's a comment here. Thank you. This is very informative. Looking forward to receiving all the slides to refer to them. And also feel free to go to my website, and my email is available there. Check out the Facebook groups. They're amazingly supportive. I keep learning from those amazing moms that are out there. Not to overuse the word amazing. We've covered a lot. Do I have access to Facebook groups at my website? I do not, and I do not have a list of them. But a quick search, if you're specific to the Pennsylvania law, just search on Facebook, Homeschooling in Pennsylvania, and you'll get groups. And then the other one is Homeschooling with Special Needs, and you will get groups. Those search engines right within Facebook itself are very amazing. I'm also one with parents of deaf children, parents who use sign language, and parents with cochlear implants. My daughter did receive them later in life by her demands. So that's another whole issue. But doing the Facebook searches is wonderful. Okie dokie. If there's no other questions, we'll send it back to the coordinator. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Patty. That was wonderful. Patty, I'm wondering, do you have a slide with your website?
The very first slide,
okay.
The cover slide has my website at the bottom under my name.
Okay, so I just want people to know that. I'm going to go back. What are we going to do? This way. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go there. Oh, yes, go up to. All right.
There you go.
There you go. There we go. So people can have your, okay. All right. There's one more question there, Patty. Do you see that, or can I? I can read it out loud. How can I find private services to have my daughter evaluated for learning disabilities? She has a developmental delay and neuro issues, but no learning diagnosis. I homeschool her and my others, but have never needed these services before. She is only 5 years old.
With her still being young, she would be eligible for diagnosing through the school district. Now, not all school districts like to do specific diagnoses, but you would be allowed to call the school district and say, I suspect my child has some learning issues, I'm not sure, and use the word child find, and that instantly kicks in a legal thing that they have a certain amount of time that they can respond before they offer testing for your child to see if your child does have special needs. If they don't have the facilities within their organization, they would be referring you out. And so the school district is a nice clearinghouse for knowing what resources are available in your geographic area. And again, that's very geographic specific. There might be a major medical center, Hershey, Geisinger, out west, CHOP from Philly, CHOP from Pittsburgh. It really depends on where you live and your school district again, but I would start by going to the district if it's not an adversarial scenario and saying, child find, I need you to test my child, I suspect there's something going on and I need to know what my options are.
Great, thank you, Patty. We still have time for more questions. If anyone would like to ask another question, please feel free to write your question in the chat box. We'll give it another minute or two. Okay.
Can I add a little point here?
Yes, if you would, please.
If you know of certified teachers that are homeschool friendly, especially for this year, my clientele is filled up. I can take new families each year, and I don't live where you all live. But I am willing to train, tutor, mentor other people who are interested in becoming evaluators. I have my own Facebook page about that, becoming a homeschool evaluator in Pennsylvania. And so anybody who's interested and really wants to embrace the ideology of homeschooling as an evaluator is welcome to contact me as well. And I've got resources posted and things I've developed, and I don't mind mentoring and spreading the blessing around a little bit.
Patty, we have two other questions. The first one, is there a way to find a private service outside of the school? From the person who was asking you about her 5-year-old.
I would ask around at major medical centers or local universities, especially if they have a special ed department. That's where I would do my asking. The best source of information are other parents of children with special needs. So if you're homeschooling and you get on one of those Facebook groups, let me tell you, you'll be able to find out resources.
Great. Okay. One other question, Patty. If I'm not a Facebook user, where can I look for support groups and help with homeschooling with special needs?
There's an organization called CHAP, like ChapStick. It stands for Christian Homeschool Association of Pennsylvania. It's open to anyone, even if you're not affiliated as a Christian. It's just our state organization. And they have support groups listed on their website. There is another organization called Pennsylvania Homeschoolers, and they also have support groups listed on their website. So if you just Google homeschool support groups in Pennsylvania, you'll come up with a bunch. But the state website for CHAP would be a great place to start. They also host our statewide curriculum fair each year, and if you get a chance to go to that, this year it's in a different location. I can't remember, but it's on their website. They will have speakers about special needs. Also, if you contact Homeschool Legal Defense Association, their special ed coordinators are also a great source of information.
And just to let people know that it is in Lancaster this year, and it is happening in the month of June. So if people go to that website for CHAP, you'll be able to find that information. A couple of other questions, Patty. One, if you are tested and diagnosed by the school, can they require you to follow an IEP or begin to file an affidavit before the age of 8?
The only way they could force you to file the affidavit is if you are requesting services from them. Remember I said it has to be mutually agreeable. So if you're not asking for services from them, no, you're not required. We got services from little on up, and so when we transitioned from preschool to school age, I said, this is a small price to pay. I'll go ahead and submit all her paperwork before she's 8 because you're giving me something, I'll give you something. It was a give and take. And so if I expect something from the district, I need to give something. And so they can't have funding for their services if our children aren't in their system. So, but can they force you? No, it has to be mutually agreeable. And anytime you come in an adversarial situation, I highly recommend Homeschool Legal Defense Association. You'll see that on the earlier slide.
Okay. So a couple of comments, not questions. One person is sharing with us that regarding evaluations, you can also get evaluations through county intermediate units. But from this person's experience, try to get a private evaluation if possible, because in her experience, sometimes districts or intermediate units are not as thorough as they should be.
Okay, and I need to ask for clarification. Is that evaluation for diagnosis of special needs, or is that the end of the year homeschool evaluation? It sounds like the diagnosis evaluation.
Yes. Let's see if we get a clarification.
I also just found out about it.
It is, yes, diagnosis evaluation.
Right. And so that's why we're careful, because when you talk about evaluations in the homeschool realm, we're talking about end-of-the-year portfolio evaluation. So for diagnosing and determining what your child's special needs are, yes, the intermediate unit is another resource, the IUs, but they are public school too. And there are private resources, but the best way is word of mouth through other homeschooling families. I just found out about a woman in our area who does a very thorough dyslexia evaluation and then follows up and gives suggestions to parents on programming changes. Very thorough. They do have to pay her for her time. A worker is worthy of her hire, but it wasn't thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars or anything like that.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Another source to have a discussion and network with other families would be if you do use Facebook and you want to join our Facebook group. That would be another place to kind of, have other family members share information as to where they have found good evaluators. So thank you for all of those questions. Well, this was an excellent session. Thank you so much, Patty. I really appreciate all your good knowledge, and thank you all for listening. And I, again, would like to remind people that as soon as we close out this session, which we're going to do in just a moment, please look out for the evaluation that's going to pop up on your screen, and please take another 5 minutes to please go ahead and give us your thoughts on this session. And thanks again, and good evening to everybody. Enjoy this beautiful weather. Take care. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Patty.